researcher. There's a phrase that the Northern Europeans and the Germans used to call Bildung, okay, which is about how it's that process of becoming like an apprenticeship. And I remember now, I can remember it as clear as, it was an August afternoon. I'd been doing my thesis for a year, and I was having some hiccups with my collaboration. And I read Clem Edelman's work about action research, and particularly Kurt Lewin, and it was as if, metaphorically, the scales dropped off my eyes, and that's what I should be doing. And suddenly, I started to change my approach. Now, that was important. Alongside that, I started to go, I'd like to name check somebody called Bridget Somack here. Now, Bridget Somack used to be the dean at the school I'm in at the university. She was there before my time, but she came back in 2012 to do a talk on action research. And of course, diligently I trotted along to hear her, because she's one of our, big hitters. She was part of the action research movement. And you might, when you come and read, she contributes quite a lot to some of the action research literature, Bridget. Anyway, I heard her talk, and she talked about the Collaborative Action Research Network. Now, there is something about me that means I'm interested in doing things. And I said to my supervisor, there's this network, it's called Collaborative Action Research Network. And I think if I'm going to do a thesis on action research, I need to join it. I need to go there. So I remember I went down to Ashford. The conference was being hosted by Canterbury. And I went down there, and it was, again, I suddenly was hanging out with people who'd been doing action research all their life. When you hang out with people, and it's just, I remember meeting Jacqueline van Svet, a Dutch teacher educator from Frontis. She may have retired now, but I had this evening chatting to her, and it was like, I cannot believe what I'm hearing here. I'm just learning how to become an action researcher. The Dutch, I was spending time with some English action researchers, and people who were teaching me, and I'd name check Mary McAteer as well here, because I met Mary for the first time, and I could see this was different. I remember somebody called Richard Winter, who's written quite a bit about action research. He was really pushed the action research movement in the UK in the 70s and 80s. And, I remember sitting down at being at a table for dinner with him, and I just thought, I felt a sense of belonging. But I was still in transition, And a year later, the next conference was in Tromsø. Okay. Now, Tromsø is up in the Arctic Circle, and I don't know if you know, it's up Norway. And I went back and I said to the university, look, if you're serious about me doing a doctorate, a piece of action research, you have to send me to Tromsø. And I don't know, I must have had somebody's ear, because they did. And there'll be moments in your life, Saj, they're defining moments. They're all, sad moments, happy moments. This was one of pure joy, because I had the privilege of hearing two big hitters you cite, Carr and Chemist talk. And Wilf Carr's work is hard to read. Let's not mess around, But I remember hearing him. It was like Radiohead. And I thought, and I like Radiohead, by the way. And I was just listening away. I thought, this is fantastic. And then for a moment, I turned off. And where is he now? I had to really work to get back. And actually, it's quite hard for some of the international audience, but I'd read some of his work and I could deal with it. And then I heard Stephen Chemist talk. And that was, like a big hero moment for me. And I suddenly started hearing about his work, and particularly his work about the theory of practice architectures, which is about how sites shape the practices, including our researching practices, Saj. And suddenly, I really was moving quickly, and I've hung on to that. And now, if I was to just turn stage left or right, I could pick up the Action Research Planner, red book, Chemist's little red book, with McTaggart and Nixon. And that's my go-to text, and I've been doing that, and I know I've been talking for a bit, but the story's not quite finished. So the following year, I went to Gateshead. So Tromsø, and 1 year, Then to Gateshead, and we had a fantastic conference, and let's name check Andy Convery. He's done a lot for FE-based action research, done a lot of work with Claire Collins, and promoting action research within the OTLA, along with Vicky Meeby. And Andy, he just breathes it. It comes out, you must have action research for breakfast. So what do you have? Well, I have a dose of action research for breakfast, lunch and tea. Anyway. Why do I mention this? Well, partly he took an action research conference to an FE college. That's a brave thing to do. And, but he also had a number of speakers there, one of whom was Tina Cook, who talked, she's really shaped my thinking. Tina was the first person who introduced to me the concept of messiness in action research, mess and messiness. And I think she's written 2 great pieces. And, that was, really a critical moment for me. And then at the same conference, Mary McAteer ran a workshop Saturday morning. Okay. Saturday morning, sat in a workshop. The title was something along the lines of, is action research a methodology or a way of being? Yeah. Well, you're nodding, Saj. That's great. And I just thought, this is it. This is where it's at. And in fact, my thesis now, and this morning, one of the reasons it's a bit late, I'm preparing the action research module for the M-level students. And, we're just tweaking things a little bit. But, it's, for me, action research is about being, it's about how we conduct ourselves. It's, and it's, it's what we say, what we do, and how we relate to people. What, that practice, really, of conducting research. That's a long answer.
It's a good answer.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I think a couple of things I wanted to pick up on. So the first thing is you mentioned the action research planner.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Was this a kind of, how would you put it, a foundational text or a text for you, would you say?
Well, I think it's really my go-to text. I mean, a few years ago, I took 2 books with me on a trip. They've done a lot of air miles, those 2 books. The first is Chemistry's Changing Practices, Changing Education text, which sets out the theory of practice architectures and the theory of colleges of practices. And the second is the Action Research Planner. And there are a few big ideas in those texts that really shape the way I work with action research and the way I challenge them, really. Mm-hmm. And the first phrase is, action research is a practice changing practice.
Wow.
Action research is a practice changing practice. So when I start my supervision, whether the doctoral or, M-level, I will say, what practice are you seeking to change? Whose practice? Okay. And I think the other thing that one of the other ideas it says is, action research is about 3 things. Number 1, better understanding our practice. Number 2, changing our practice. 3, changing the conditions under which we practice. And just name checking my colleague Kevin Orr, who's not particularly an action researcher, he might say, he's a practitioner researcher, has done some work on FE-based vocational teaching and subject specialist pedagogy. Kevin would say, I heard him talk a couple of weeks back, he said this, he said, the first thing as a researcher is to better understand what we are researching. If we want to change practice, that's the next thing we look at, okay? Or improve practice, that's the thing they like in FE, improving practice, don't they? That's the next thing. But better understanding, and I really hold on to that. And a couple of other things that I mentioned, because I think they, in a sense, upset or disrupt our thinking. There are a lot of people, who are wedded to the concept of the action research cycle. Kemi says, well, just a sec, actually, it's not as neat and tidy as that. He said, it's not as neat and tidy as trying to, create new knowledge. He said, action research should be about making history. Okay. And that might be making history in a small way in, what Greta Thunberg said. I mean, you mentioned it as we chatted before, it might be a small change, but it still makes history. Okay. And, he's also, and I think this is also important, he says, action research should be about trying to make the world a better place